Welcome back to the Balancing Act podcast. I'm Andy Temte. On the Balancing Act, we talk to business leaders and industry experts to explore the balancing acts we play in our professional lives, and we learn about the events that put rocket boosters behind their career success. Today is episode 151, and we are rejoined by the Patrick Lencioni. Patrick is the founder at the Table Group and is the pioneer of the organizational health movement. He's a world-renowned author with titles such as The Five Dysfunctions of a Team, The Advantage, and his most recent work, The 6 Types of Working Genius. Welcome back to the show, Patrick. It's
great to be back.
I mean, we just got finished recording episode 150, so we didn't go anywhere, but our listeners did for a week.
Yes. I wonder if they're still wearing the same shirt that they wore last week, like me, you, and I are, though.
Right. Yeah, we're both in the same shirt. Awesome. So we're talking with you about the world of organizational health. Let's continue where we left off last show. I like to run thought experiments. And so let's suppose you have the members of a C-suite of a new client organization sitting right in front of you right now. This client is hiring you to help them build a healthier organization and a stronger organizational culture to drive better business results. What's the most important piece of advice you can offer to the senior executive team that, if followed, will have the greatest impact on the probability of success?
I would say this. Even though most of us grow up, because of the way we're educated, to think that we're lacking some bit of knowledge, I would say, and this gets back to what we talked about last time, it's really your willingness to be uncomfortable with one another as human beings, which means vulnerable and humble and having courage and having conflict. If you're willing to be vulnerable with each other and be uncomfortable, you're going to solve problems and your business is going to thrive. But if you go into this thinking that I'm not going to have to be behaviorally any different than I was before, I just have to learn something or flip a switch or plug in a program, it's not going to work. So it's being willing to be personally uncomfortable in order to make the organization better. And there's nothing touchy-feely about that. This is not soft. It's not weird. It's like solving problems as a team, which is what this comes down to, comes from people being willing to behave differently, take risks interpersonally, and really wrestle with things. Yeah. And it's liberating, it's actually fun, and it's exhausting. And if you're willing to do it, I promise you're going to achieve market improvement in almost everything you're doing. But I can't tell you it. And here's the other interesting thing is, if you want me to promise you exactly how much your bottom line is going to improve, I could never do that. Right. I just know it's going to be huge. But if you need a metric or a measurement, like, okay, if we spend this much time and energy on this, how much is it going to improve our margins? It's like, I don't know, and I can't possibly know. It's going to be vastly different. So be willing to be uncomfortable, dive in there, have the faith that it's going to work, and it always does.
Yeah. For me, it was this process of discovery. And in our last episode, you, in passing, made reference to marriage counseling. Mm-hmm. And I have a unique story, not too unique, but my wife and I were divorced and are happily remarried. So I'm divorced and remarried to the same woman. And you can imagine there's lots of marriage counseling that goes along with a journey like that.
Praise God. That's fantastic.
Right? Yes, fantastic for everybody involved. Now, the timeline of that work was the marriage counseling was all in kind of the 2005 to 2007-8 range. And then Tim Smaby walks into my office in 2009, slaps your book on my desk and says, "Here, we got to do this." And when I started to get into it, and then we had Christine and Jeff on site, starting the work, the light bulbs really started going off for me. I was like, this is like marriage counseling, only we're doing it in a professional setting. So everybody gets all wiggly and all weird about, oh my God, they feel so, they feel like they've like something's and with a marriage it is broken, and with a business it is broken. We're sitting here, we need counseling, and it's got such a bad rap over the years. And I'm like, no, we got to go through some organizational marriage counseling as a C team. How are we handling our meetings? How are we interacting together? What's the communication cadence? And as you know, the point that you've made several times in our time together is it's the simple stuff.
Oh,
it's so simple, but we get ourselves all wrapped up in the complex, and we convince ourselves that business is all about the numbers and all about production and blah, blah, blah. And it's really about how humans and people interact with one another. So that link between marriage counseling and organizational health is really strong. And I've worked really hard to break down the stigma that surrounds counseling, because what your team comes in and does as part of a table group interaction is very much in that.
yes, that's wonderful. Wow. If that impacted your marriage and your ability to put that together, that is like, maybe that's why I'm on earth. That's enough right there. That's fantastic. Yeah. And I wonder, do you ever say to people like, well, in my first marriage, this is how I did things? What a cool thing that you, and companies need to do that too.
Yeah.
In our first company, like, oh, was it different? Well, no, it's the same company now, but we're doing it differently.
Yeah.
And that requires, again, more courage and humility than it does intellectual prowess.
Yes, absolutely.
That's fantastic.
So let's shift gears. I want to talk about your creative process. You write. I was fascinated back in episode 150 when you were talking about you wanted to be a screenwriter, and now the aha moment, the light bulb goes off for me. Oh yeah, okay. He writes in parables. He writes in stories. These fictionalized tales. I'd like to introduce our listeners more to your creative process. What is the primary source of inspiration for your books? And this is probably a hard question, but of all the books you've written, which one is your favorite? And then which one was the most difficult to write?
Well, let's answer the last ones first so I don't forget.
Yeah.
It's really hard to say which one is my favorite. And I don't like to say it like my children. I don't know how to pick a favorite child. I don't have one. But there are certain things, like I wrote a book called, we retitled, it was originally called The 3 Signs of a Miserable Job. And that's really what it's about. But then nobody could take it to work. Mm-hmm. And so after it had been out for a year, people were like, hey, we like this, but I have to take the cover off and hide it in my backpack. So we retitled it The Truth About Employee Engagement. Mm. And I love it because it really gets to the reason why I started writing, because of my dad's job and that he was frustrated. And it gets to, I think one of the most important things is, why do people love going to work and go home a better person? And so I loved writing it. It's like closest to my heart, I think. So I think that one is my favorite. The hardest one to write was probably The Advantage, because it's not fiction. So it was really like going through all the things we do and describing it and putting case studies in there and trying to make it kind of fun and entertaining. So that's the answer to the last 2 questions. Probably the Truth About Employee Engagement is my favorite book, and the Advantage was probably the hardest to write. Now, my creative process is people always ask me, how long does it take to write a book? In fact, I have an 18-year-old son at home. 2 of his friends were asking me just yesterday about a book I'm writing, and they said, when does it come out? How long does it take? If you put it all together, and I were the kind of person that could write full time, I would say it probably takes, probably 6 to 9 months to write a book. But I don't ever write full time. Actually, it's probably 3 to 6 months to write a book if you sandwiched it all together. But for me, it's probably more like 9 to 12 months, because I write when I feel motivated. What's crazy about the way I write, and this has to do with my personality, is that I make a lot of progress very fast, and then sometimes it all slows down, because it kind of depends on when I'm inspired. But here's the best way for me to write. is to be in a room by myself, but where there's other people around. I used to do my best writing. I'd go to a hotel and I'd sit in the lobby. I'd find a desk or a table to sit at, and other people would be around doing things. So I could look up and kind of watch people, and it would kind of distract me just enough to actually get thoughtful. I mean, like, because you do songwriting and you're in a band, and everybody has a different process for accessing their creativity. It's not good for me to be in a quiet room all by myself staring at a blank wall.
Really?
Yeah. I need to be distracted. I'm an ENFP in the Myers-Briggs, and we're going to talk about my working genius, and I have a little bit of ADHD. So if there's things that are distracting me a little bit, that's actually accessing my creativity.
Wow.
So,
because I have to, before the show, I introduced you to my band, The Remainders, and we've got an album coming out this fall. I write music with Nick. All of my song ideas have come to me on my lawn tractor, on a bicycle, or in the airplane. Now, I'm all by myself. The wind is rushing by my head, or the roar of the engine, either airplane or my lawn tractor, and things just start coming out.
Right. It's passive distractions free you up, but not active ones. Now, if people were coming up and asking you questions,
right?
You know, if the flight attendant starts talking to you about something, but if you're sitting there and there's things going on, but you're not really focused on them, I really do think we kind of need to clear out the front part of our brain to go deeper. And so that's kind of how it is for me too.
Yeah, that's very cool. If our listeners could pick only one of your books to read, which one would you insist that they dive into? You got like 8 books and you say, you got to read this one. What's the why?
Well, if they said, I really want to understand what you do for organization, I want to get the best comprehensive understanding of what you do, it would have to be The Advantage, because it's the one book. Somebody finally said, you got to put together, I hate calling it a textbook because that sounds boring, but a comprehensive guide. So that's The Advantage. But if it were a leader who said, I really want to get started, where do I start? I wrote a book a couple years ago called The Motive, which is all about why should you want to be a leader in the first place? Because if your motive for being a leader is wrong, and it is for so many people, nothing else makes sense. And basically what it means is if your motive is for yourself, it's like the personal economics of leadership are very bad. And if you think becoming a leader is going to make your life better, you're not going to be a great leader because you're not going to do the hard things that other people need. But if your motive is to serve others, and I really mean that, like I want to serve, even suffer for others to make their life better and the company better and our customers better and their families better and mine, then if your motive is clear, then that's the place to start. And there's just too many people that think I want to be the CEO of a company. And when you really ask them why, it's like, well, because I think it'll be fun and it'll give me money and authority and power and maybe a little bit of a fame. That's going to be a lonely place at the end of that road.
Yeah, I call many leaders are what I refer to as accidental managers. They get tapped on the shoulder because they were really good individual contributors in tech or marketing or whatever, sales, and they get tapped on the shoulder and would you like to lead some people? Okay, yeah. And then, I get to lead people and I get to do things the way I want to do them, which is exactly the opposite motivation that you should have.
Exactly.
And it took me far too long to recognize that I was there in service of others. So...
And wonderful people get this wrong. It's not like there's two kinds of people, like the wrong motive and the right one. So many leaders have read this book, and I'm so proud of the ones that do this. So many people, and they call me and go, my motive was wrong. I needed to fix it. I was doing it for all the wrong reasons. We can adjust, but we have to do it intentionally so that we go into it knowing that, hey, this is going to be a sacrifice, and I'm willing to accept that. So the way you describe that is exactly right. All of us can drift into to what I call self-centered leadership, you know. And you know, there's a lot of people will say, they'll talk about people being a servant leader. And I really don't like that term because it implies that there's a different kind. Right. Every kind of leadership should be servant leadership.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, that's the only kind there is. I love when I meet people and they go, yeah, I had a chance to become the leader of this organization. I talked to a guy the other day. I love this guy. His name is Alan. And he goes, I actually just want to be the number 2. I want to help the leader. I don't want to be that person. And I'm like, wow, you know yourself. And that is wonderful that you could walk away from a position of power and authority knowing that that's not your thing.
Yeah, you brought up servant leadership, and I have challenges with servant leadership as well. Many of the concepts within that practice are awesome. I like to think of the word stewardship. I am here to steward the business forward. I am here to make the business not about me, but about the people that are here today and will be here tomorrow, because the long-term sustainability of this business and growth of it is what really matters, and the success of the people that are within it. So me as a steward is a mindset that I think is important to think about.
As you said that, Andy, I just thought, yeah, it's macro servant, like you're serving others, but that doesn't mean you're doing everything they want you to do. Because if you're a micro servant leader, then you're just going to do whatever people ask you to do, and you might drive your business into the ground.
Right.
So it's like stewardship is like, I'm going to do what's best for you, but in the short term, it might not be what you want. Because you can't serve all the people that work for you every day. It's going to crush you, and you're going to end up trying to please everyone. And you know, when you try to please everyone, what happens? You end up pleasing no one. So that's a great distinction.
There may be some broccoli involved.
Yes.
Let's shift gears to your latest work, The 6 Types of Working Genius. Please tell us about the premise, and as you're going through it, what are your natural gifts, and then what do you struggle with? And then I've already said that I'm a W and a G at the top.
I love that. I know what to talk to you about.
Yeah, and I'm an E and a T at the bottom. But then I look at my results and I go, well, I kind of sort of like to do that sometimes. But anyway, I want to hear about you. So, what's the premise of the book and of the widgets?
Right.
Where do you land?
So the idea here, and it is a book, but it's also an assessment. And people go, should I read the book first? And I'm like, no, go take the assessment and learn about yourself. Then the book explains it in more depth. But the idea is by accident, and thank God for this, because we came up with this 4 years ago by accident. Like all of our stuff comes from my experiences working with clients and working with my team. And we came up, I realized one day, by the grace of God, that there's these 6 activities that have to be done in any organization, whether it's at home or in your company, whether it's launching a new program, planning a family vacation, building out a product, launching a podcast. Anything you do requires 6 different activities. And what we realized was only 2 of them does any one person have as like what we call their working genius. They get joy and energy out of it. So everybody has 2 working geniuses. They love doing it. And yours are, you love pondering things and thinking about things and deep thought. Mm-hmm. You're up in your head, like asking questions. That's one of yours. Yep. And the other one is you like to get people excited. You like to get people moving. You like to get in front of people and inspire them to change. Selling something you're passionate about is fun for you. Okay. Well, neither of those are my working geniuses. Right? So one of my working geniuses is what we call invention, which I love to come up with new ideas from scratch with no conditions. Oh, a blank whiteboard and a pen is my favorite thing.
Yep.
And then my next genius is what's called discernment, which I love evaluate. I love like using my gut to evaluate things like intuition, instinct, pattern recognition, curating things. Well, those are 2 things that you don't mind doing, and they're called your working competencies because you can do those, but it's not the first place you get joy and energy. You and I both share the same working frustrations, I think. And that is the E and the T. Is that right?
Yes, I'm. My frustrations are E and T. Yes.
Okay. Most of the people who have a podcast are like that. And here's why. Because E and T is called enablement and tenacity. And people that have enablement and tenacity, they're the most implementation-oriented people. They love to just like maintain things, help people to maintain things and get things done. You and I live a lot closer to the earlier stages of starting things and coming up with new ideas. Now, people that love to implement things, those are such valuable geniuses. They're the kind of people when you say, I need your help, they go, I got it, I'll finish it. You're not going to have to worry about it. They're called the loyal finishers. Well, they're not flaky, they're responsible, and they get up every morning and say, I just want to help people get things done. And we love them in organizations, and they actually get joy and energy from that. Do you and I like doing that sometimes? Of course. None of these are like, I can't do it at all. But those people can do that for 12 hours in a row and go home and say, what a fun day I had. What a great day it was. I love my job. Well, you know something, Andy? When I got out of college and I took my first job at Bain & Company, which we talked about on the first show, it was a job that was all about enablement and tenacity. They were the two things. I would go to work for 15 hours a day and have to work in my frustration. And those 2 years were the longest decade of my life.
Yeah.
Because I was doing the very thing that actually caused me to lose energy.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it at the time. When I finally left after 2 years, I barely hung on to get my 2 years in. I walked away thinking I was less intelligent and lazier than I thought I was because I just didn't enjoy it. And other people enjoyed it. 35 years later, I look back and I realize, oh my gosh, it was just the wrong job for me.
Yeah.
But I had no language to understand that. And my hope is that somebody could get offered a job and people could go, well, it pays well and everybody else wants this job. And they could go, yeah, but that would be miserable for me. Because that job that I took was supposed to be the best job in America for college grads. Little did I know I was preparing myself for 2 years of self-flagellation and guilt. And it took a long time to recover from that. And now that I know that was my working genius, I'm like, oh, that was just not a good job for me.
Yeah.
So I really believe everybody should know what their working genius is, what the gifts God gave them, because we're meant to use those. And when people go through life doing work, and it's not like in the wrong field, I mean doing like day-to-day work that doesn't fit their working genius, it can be kind of a tragedy. And there's every company needs all the geniuses. So there's usually plenty of things you can have people do that slide into their working genius. I've had so many CEOs, Andy, say they were going to fire somebody and then realize they looked at their working genius and said, oh man, I have them in the wrong job.
Right.
If I move them, they would actually be happier. They would get more done. I would be happier with them. This can allow us not to lose good employees who are just sitting in the wrong chair in our company.
Yeah, it's a different lens to look at the value of the diversity of thought and opinion and talent within the organization. And so many leaders want to hire people that look like them, talk like them, think like them. And, I made these mistakes. And what you get are a bunch of folks who are really, really good at a couple of the geniuses, and then you're missing the rest. And you sit back and scratch your head and go, well, why aren't we growing? Why aren't we creating excellent customer outcomes? Well, because you don't have that broad diversity of thought, opinion within your organization. So
yeah, exactly.
I love how it's a different lens to look at that age-old problem.
And I actually think in a world where diversity is applied in weird ways today, and it's like, this is the first thing I want to understand is how are you wired?
Yep.
Because I need people that are wired for big head in the clouds thinking. Well, that's one of the things I need people who love to finish things. I love people who are at 50,000 feet dreaming about where the plane should go. And I like people who know how to land the plane. And I like all the things in between. I had a CEO say, He had this woman that worked for him, and she was his head of sales, and she was a cultural fit. She had made her numbers. Her staff loved her. And yet the market changed. They needed to come up with a new sales strategy. They needed to go up and do some wondering like you do, an invention. She couldn't do it. And he goes, I was about to fire her.
Yep.
And he goes, because I thought, well, if she can't do that, maybe she's not the right person. They did the working genius. And he said, you're an ET. You know how to help people. You finish things. You drive the numbers. The customers love you. Your employees love you. But you can't think out of the box because it says right here, that's not one of the things you like. And she goes, I know. They found a guy in marketing, and he came in 3 hours because he had those geniuses and became their consultant. And he goes, I almost fired one of my best people.
Right.
Because I thought she had to be good at everything. And once he knew what she was great at and what she really didn't like doing, he was able to organize around that and keep from losing. We lose good people all the time, not because they don't have the right cultural attitudes. They're just in the wrong chair.
Yeah. Well, Pat, we have to start winding things down. And I'm reticent to do so. The last comment that I'll make on this topic of diversity of thought and opinion, the working geniuses, is you talked about this person was in this chair. I was almost going to fire them, and that mindset of fire and replace is a very dangerous thing for leaders. It's so costly. So thank you for creating a model. There are several out there, but a model for leaders to look at the value of diversity of talent within their organization so that they stop making, like I have made myself, these terrible decisions of, Billy is not right for this job, but I really don't understand what makes Billy tick. So I'm going to fire Billy and I'm going to coin operated go get somebody else who knows how to do that. So it's fantastic to have more tools like this that allow leaders to recognize that people are not just coin-operated machines. They're not easily replaceable, and that we need to invest in them and understand what makes them tick and be okay that people don't talk like you, look like you, and work like you.
You know what's interesting about this is that I love all the tools. I love Myers-Briggs and DISC and all those tools out there. Yep. And we've used them all in our practice. This one is not focused on your personality or your preference. It's really focused on the actual work that brings you joy. And we'd never seen anything like that. And the other thing is we did the assessment. The assessment takes 12 minutes. Mm-hmm. And people look at it and they go, oh yeah, this is totally me. And oh, those are the things I'm terrible at. And now I can actually admit it. And we wanted something that was so concrete and so applicable. And we've seen CEOs, leaders, teachers, principals, pastors make changes within the first 20 minutes of doing it on their teams. And they're like, this guy, we have a job over here he'd be great at. And it changes their lives. It changes their organization. And it's quick. So this is we love all the other tools and we encourage them. This one is the closest to what kind of work should they be doing.
Right. Yep.
And so I get really excited when people rediscover their geniuses. So
that's awesome. Well, Pat, 2 lightning round questions for you.
Okay.
I give you access to a time machine. You can send a short message to an earlier version of Patrick Lencioni. What's the message and what previous version of yourself do you choose to send it to?
You sent me that question ahead of time to ponder, which I'm glad. It would be 25 years old. It would definitely be when I'd go back to 25 years old. That's when I got diagnosed with OCD. I'd had it my whole life. I had a not crippling, but really bad case of OCD my whole life. And I didn't know why. And so I got diagnosed when I was 25, but I never understood the concept of wounds. And I've learned about it in the last 5 years of my life. So I would go back to my 25-year-old self and say, Pat, you got to look at why you have this and what happened to you when you were young so that you can come to terms with that and not live out of your wounds as though they were strengths. Because I mean, my fear of failure motivated me as a child. Well, that takes a toll on you. And I continued to motivate or to work out of that for the next 25 years of my life. And I didn't need to, but I needed to understand that so I could address those things. So I would go back to my 25-year-old self and say, get counseling now, explore your wounds. It's okay. It's not a self-pity thing. Understand why you've been broken a little bit and heal now rather than later. So that's what I would do.
Awesome. We are second lightning round question. We are all works in progress. What are you focused on right now in your personal journey of growth?
Well, it gets back to what I just said is that I've been doing, and again, I'm not a touchy-feely guy, and this is not touchy-feely. I've been in therapy exploring, and it's just fascinating. And it's not different than the kind of work we do with companies, but going deep around like, so why do I act the way I do? And some of that's personality, some of that's preferences, but some of it is wounds.
Yeah. And
unpacking that allows me to kind of rethink like, why do I do what I do? And maybe I don't need to do that. And maybe I do that for the wrong reasons. So I'm actually working on a book about how a leader can get a fairly quick understanding of themselves and identify what they need help with. So then they can go pursue the right things. Because I don't think I think the self-diagnosis and the on-ramp to healing is pretty broken. So I'm working on something right now to help leaders really better understand themselves and where they need help.
That's awesome. Just in these last few minutes, you've used that term woundings, and we had a gal named Amber Ontiveros on the show about 5 or 6 episodes ago. And she's written a book on that same topic.
Really?
So I
Amber Ontiveros. I'll check it out.
Yeah, I invite our listeners to go back and listen to that episode. Pat, this has been an absolute pleasure. I'm so excited that we got 2 episodes of content out of this engagement. What's next for you? Where can folks learn more? You said you got another book in the works. Where are you going?
Well, you can find out anything you need to about me and the company and what we're doing at Table Group, table like kitchen table, tablegroup.com. That's our company. Or go to Working Genius, because the Working Genius we think is going to be bigger than anything we've ever done. We're just about at 1 million people that have done this assessment, which has blown us away. We had no idea that there was a new phase of our business that was going to be bigger. And thanks be to God that we're like excited about this like nothing else we've ever done. And so go to workinggenius.com and you can learn all about the Working Genius thing. You can take the assessment, do all that. It costs a little bit of money. But so that's what I'm really working on is that and this wound book. And I'm moving to Tennessee. So our office is going to be in south of Nashville. We've been in California our whole lives, but like so many businesses, we're moving. And so that's the next thing too.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for your contributions to the show. So appreciated.
All right. Thank you, Andy. God bless.
All right. My name is Andy Temte. This is the Balancing Act podcast. You can find us on all the major streaming services as well as out on YouTube. Please like, subscribe, rate, and most importantly, share this public good with your friends and your colleagues. The show is produced by Nick Temte. We'll see you next time on the Balancing Act.